All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to just allow a couple minutes for people to trickle in since the ceremony just ended. But welcome. We're so glad you're here. All right. Good. All right. Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you all for joining our post-memorial ceremony discussion, The Path of Hope. I'm Tiffany Goodwin Van Camp, the Executive Director of American Friends of Combatants for Peace. It's an honor to have been with you all online for the ceremony. And even though we are scattered across the world, I know that we are together in heart and spirit. Today, we had over 5,000 people worldwide watching the event and approximately 10,000 people in person. So the joint memorial ceremony day is co-organized by Combatants for Peace and Parent Circle Families Forum. This talk today is co-hosted by the American arm of both organizations. American Friends of Parent Circle Families Forum shares the human side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with the American public in order to foster a peace and reconciliation process. The American Friends Parent Circle Families Forum is committed to supporting Parent Circle Families Forum through raising public awareness, constituency building, and fundraising in the U.S. And Combatants for Peace builds the social infrastructure necessary to end the conflict and the occupation. They use nonviolent civil resistance and creative activism to build a free and peaceful future from the ground up. And they are the only movement worldwide that is jointly founded by ex-combatants, ex-fighters from both sides of an active conflict. As international allies, American Friends of Combatants for Peace uses education and direct action to build support and resources that empower the movement. Some quick housekeeping. So today you will have the opportunity to ask questions. You'll see there's two profiles that have the name Send Questions Here, and you are able to send your questions to those two profiles and they will send it to our moderator. I would like to introduce our moderator, Shiri Orion, who is the Executive Director of our partnering org, American Friends of Parent Circle Families Forum. Our two speakers today are Aziz Abusara and Elik Elhana. They are both board members of American Friends of Combatants for Peace, and they are both members of Parent Circle Families Forum, both bereaved family members who have lost loved ones to the conflict and occupation. So thank you all for joining us. There will be a recording in case you have someone who wants to see this who's unable to attend. And with that, I would like to hand this over to Shiri.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. I really appreciate it. This was the 18th annual Memorial Day ceremony. It was especially moving for me this year. Elik and I, Elik is one of our speakers, but I can remember back in the day, I don't know, I think it was maybe like the 11th or 12th annual ceremony. We watched it in a little room in New York together with about 20 people. And it has grown tremendously. And I think especially after 3 years of COVID, of not being able to be in the park in person and seeing the sea of people gather together, both Palestinians and Israelis at the park today in Israel to express grief and mourning and bereavement in a way that is different from the national narrative. And that feels it's more about shared pain and shared loss and our ability as Israelis and Palestinians and Americans and people all over the world to make a difference and not to have the same story every year. And so today I am really proud and privileged to have Elik Elhanan and Aziz Abusara with us. both of whom are members of the Parent Circle Families Forum and both of whom are members of Combatants for Peace. Hi, Elik. Hi, Aziz. Thank you so much for joining us. Elik and Aziz are actually here living in the United States. So they watch, the ceremony like we do from afar, but they feel the connection close to their hearts. Obviously, probably much closer than we do, since they've paid the highest price to the conflict. And they have still, despite this loss and despite this heavy price, they have come together and made a statement to say, there's a different way, that peace is possible, that violence is not an answer, and that they come together in order for there to be no more bloodshed. So Elik and Aziz, I know you both grew up in Jerusalem. I know that you both lost your siblings. And I know that you are both leaders of peace movements today, both Parent Circle Families Forum and Combatants for Peace. Can you both tell us a little bit more about yourselves, about who you lost, about how you experienced your loss, and how you went from paying this very difficult, heavy price to today being leaders in peace movements. One of the speakers, Yuval Sapir, at the Memorial Day ceremony spoke about this black hole. He also lost his sibling. He talked about this black hole that stays with him, no matter what the accomplishment is, no matter how much he achieves, no matter how much, he celebrates, he got married, he has children, he has a family. He talks about this loss being with him all the time, and how he uses that in a way to propel him forward and to have him keep going every day. So maybe you can touch a little bit about that and how that resonates or doesn't resonate for you. Who's going to go first?
Aziz, please.
Elik, go ahead.
Okay, I always lose this one. Hello, everyone. It's a privilege and an honor to speak to you today after the ceremony, particularly doing this with my very good friend, my brother Aziz. We've been doing this work longer than the ceremony has been around. I think we started working together early 2004 or 5. Through the Parent Circle, and to speak very briefly about myself. I'm from Jerusalem. I'm 46 years old. Currently, I live here in New York. I'm a professor of Yiddish literature in college here. And yeah, the things that Yuval Sapir said about that black hole definitely did resonate with me. Good for him that he can make it into a driving force. In my case, it's more like treading lightly on thin ice. But we all have to live with this absence and this loss, and somehow find a way to organize our lives around it or with it. I lost my sister, Smadar, in 1997, September 1997, one of those terrorist attacks that Netanyahu is very proud never happened during his regime. One of them cost the life of my sister. She was 14 years old. And I was 20 years old at the time. I was a soldier. I was serving in the army, in a special forces unit of this Israeli army. And needless to say, this moment changed my life and changed the trajectory and the meaning of everything I was doing. For me, and in my family, very easily, the shock of losing my sister transformed very quickly into a sense of outrage and a sense of urgency. Outrage because the death of my sister was incorporated into Israeli propaganda to justify the continuation of the occupation, and a sense of outrage because these very actions that the death of my sister justified will bring the death of other people, Israelis and Palestinians. And we felt it's very urgent to act against that, not let the memory of my sister be appropriated in this way. These were kind of the feelings that guided me after I finished my military service, to first of all join the parent circle and be active through there. This was the first place I ever met Palestinians. I ever met the grief of the other side, that until very shortly I was very dedicated to bringing about. And later on, through the path that led me to Combatants for Peace, through Courage to Refuse, I refused to serve in the Israeli army, to participate in the actions of the occupation. From that, we moved on to Combatants for Peace, the movement that brought together those Israelis that refused with Palestinians, Palestinian fighters, Palestinian combatants who experienced that price of the struggle and were willing to talk to us, to discuss with us a different non-violent form of resistance to the occupation. I will answer very honestly. I think that in many, many ways, this political activity and on a person, I was the first speaker in the first ceremony. My father shared on Facebook my speech from back then. I was angry. Very, very angry. And in fact, that's what I said. Today, don't be sad, be angry. More people will die. More people will die because we can't save them. Be angry at ourselves and be angry at the people who do not act. That's what I said in the first ceremony 18 years ago. I think that it is through the ceremony, through the 18 years of work on bringing this miracle about, every year, bringing Israelis and Palestinians together so we can express our pain, seeing the generosity of our Palestinian brothers, that they are willing to come to us on this day and to hear us and to accept us on this day, to give us some sort of mirror we can recognize our humanity in. I think that it is this 18 years of engagement that really taught me to move beyond the anger I felt 18 years ago into a much, much more complex and humane understanding, both of my feelings and of my loss, and of the political potential that this that our event has and what it promises both people.
Thank you, Alec. And I'm going to ask you a little bit more later about the ceremony and what it means to you. So thanks for giving us a little bit of insight into that. Aziz, you too, I'm going to ask you after about the ceremony and what it means to you. If you can, for now, just share with us about your story of loss and what made you choose this path of peace and reconciliation rather than revenge.
Right. So thank you, Alec. Thank you, Shiri. But Alec and I have done this, like he said, quite a few times, both in Israel and Palestine and in the US. I think the largest crowd either of us probably spoke to was in the mall, Washington, where we had like 15,000 people stuck with us, and an amazing memory. I, just like Alec, I think our story is quite similar in the sense he lost his sister, I lost my brother. The only difference is he lost a younger sister. I lost my older brother, Taysir, who was 19 years old when he was killed, when he died. Taysir was arrested from home in the first Intifada on suspicion of throwing rocks, which he refused to confess to these charges. And as a result, he was beaten up until he would confess, which resulted in internal injuries that by the time he was let go from prison, he already was dying. We took him to a hospital, and after a surgery, a few days after a surgery, he ended up dying as a result of that. I was 10 years old when that happened, and it's very hard to explain to a 10-year-old such a loss. Taysir was my just older brother. I'm the youngest of 7, and it meant he was the one just right older than me, and it meant he was the person who was very involved in my life. It wasn't my parents who took me to school, my first day at school. It was him. It wasn't, if I had bad grade, if I had a problem in school, it was him. If I had a problem with a neighbor kid, it was him who showed up and fixed it. So in many ways, to me, it felt more like losing a parent than losing a brother. But that also meant I got very angry, and a 10-year-old, everything is pretty white and black. Everything is pretty clear. And to me, those soldiers broke into our home, arrested him, killed him. That's the only Israeli Jews I knew anyway. And so for the next 8 years, my activities were only focused on revenge and finding ways to make those who killed my brother pay the price. I did it through writing, I did it through throwing rocks, all of that kind of stuff. And eventually, when I was 18, I ended up learning Hebrew. And in my Hebrew class, I started encountering Israeli Jews who were not soldiers. And we started having discussions and conversations. And that resulted into me eventually joining Bereaved Families Forum and later on Combatants for Peace. Through these conversations. And actually, my first ever talk for peace was with Alex's dad, who was a mentor, is a mentor still for me. And it's that kind of the anger really never goes away that Alec talks about. It transforms into action, just like you said. And for me, I had to find something that's doing maybe good for the world instead of trying to hurt others. But I think I'm as angry today as I was, 30 years ago. Not much has changed in that sense. It's about how do we use that anger. Alex said he was the first speaker in the ceremony. I was in the second ceremony. So he got the first and the second. And I remember thinking back then, it was huge, even though there were 150 people, 200 people in that small theater. And it was such a big deal, even back then. So it's amazing seeing it growing the way it has.
Thank you, Aziz, for sharing your story, and thank you both for sharing your story. And we all feel your loss today, and especially every day, but especially today. I think it's interesting that you both talked about the transformation of your feelings and your anger. Alec, you talked about, your speech on the first day, and then today, and Aziz, you talked about the hatred that's still there, but that you're using it differently. And I think for a lot of people that come into contact with members of Combatants for Peace and the Parents Circle Families Forum, that this happens too. There's a transformation. There's this moment of when something changes for you in your heart or emotionally, and then you start this journey. And you guys have both been on a journey since you lost your loved ones. Alec, you started to touch upon about this a little bit when you were talking earlier about how the Memorial Day ceremony, about what it means for you. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that, what it means for you, and what do you think it means for the Israelis that are participating in it? And Aziz, if you could do the same and talk a little bit about the Palestinians. We know that almost every year for the past several years, the Palestinians have been barred from entering into Israel on Memorial Day. And then, like every year, the organizations appeal to the Supreme Court. And like every year, this year, we were able to bring the Palestinian members into Israel to be a part of this day. And many Palestinians are watching the ceremony as well. So Aziz, when you talk, if you could refer a little bit to that about what you think it means to Palestinians and what the Memorial Day ceremony means to you.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. I mean, what you asked is a very interesting question. What this journey you're talking about, what exactly happens there, is something I'm very interested in, and well, I'm an academic, but I'll try not to be boring. But I think that, yeah, it's a tremendous moment of transformation. This is why it inspires so much hope and so much engagement from so many people. And this is also why it inspires so much resistance. You could hear the screaming and the vile curses disturbing the ceremony. And I think this works on, in a sense, kind of two levels, psychological and political. And I mean, here I'm talking personally, completely about myself and about my experience, and I'm sure others will share with that. But I think on the psychological level, what takes place when one loses a loved one, when we experience grief, our world falls apart, literally. The world shatters. You are undone as a person. And the mission of climbing out of this hole is somehow finding language again, finding words to make the world have meaning and sense, and in somehow moving on when all the time the memory of loss drags you back, because when you move on, you've left everything behind. And this is the impossible task of mourning. In our particular case, this loss was organized by the narrative of Zionism and sacrifice for Israel, etc., etc., that allegedly was supposed to give my sister and the death of so many other loved ones a meaning. Because, I mean, you know, she didn't accidentally die. She died in the context of a violent conflict that we choose to continue and entertain. Because of the position me and my family took on this conflict, these ceremonies don't work for us. They didn't give the death of my sister any meaning. Quite on the contrary, they exposed it as the terrible, monstrous waste that it was. It didn't promote freedom for Palestine. It did not promote safety for Israel. She just died. And there is a need to find a new language. There is a need to find new names for things, and new ways to symbolize things and to give them meaning, if not necessarily to the fact of her death, but to the fact of my suffering, to the fact of the pain and the loss that I'm experiencing. And this language was found in the ceremony and in Combatants for Peace and in the parent circle. Not in some magical way, but in the ongoing everyday work to build something joint, something public, something uniquely ours, between Israelis and Palestinians, in a certain sense, creating this impossible. And in the context of this work, we also find the courage to kind of lay ourselves bare and tell someone else, I mean, that we hurt exactly the thing that was denied from us once we took an oppositional stand against the state of Israel. And in a sense, this is recreated in the ceremony, where I can tell Aziz very simply that I hurt, and hear from someone that it's okay, it's human, even with the context, even with the history, even with all the circumstances, it's okay. And this is psychologically, I mean, as I said before, this is the mirror that we need in order to recognize and reappropriate our humanity as Israelis, given the context in which we lost so many of our loved ones, given the ongoing atrocities of the occupation. This is, I think, I mean, personally, I never met greater generosity in my life than that our Palestinian brothers are showing to us on that day. On the other hand, and with this I'll end just for a minute, on a political level, this is such a meaningful event for me because it shows that when we want to do something, doesn't matter how silly or preposterous it is, we can. When we started this ceremony, it was, I mean, a thumb in the eye. It was an initiative of a very angry parent, Yona Bargu, that wanted an alternative from the ongoing appropriation of the memory of his son. And he approached us. And we said, yes, we thought it will be a good moment. The generosity, again, of our Palestinian partners in supporting us in that. And I remember I ran around Tel Aviv with my brother. We hid in night and we plastered the walls with posters. This was the only publicity. And the room was packed. And we said, oh my God, this is a miracle. This is unbelievable. How can this happen? Next year, when Aziz was the speaker, it was twice as big. The next year, again, we were seeing the sea of people giving a standing ovation when Yossi Tzabari said democracy for all or equal rights for all from river to the sea of people standing and applauding and cheering. I mean, we started with 100 people 18 years ago.
Amazing, Elliot.
I don't know if I have much to add because I just fully agree with everything you said. Alec, I think the only thing comes to my mind, at least from the Palestinian side, but I think it's true on the Israeli side as well. There is a concerted effort to make the only image we see of the other is the absolute enemy. I work in tourism, right? I take tourists to Israel and Palestine all the time with my company. And I always tell my tourists, it's much easier for you to cross between Israelis and Palestinians and talk to Israelis and Palestinians than the most successful peace activists even. Because there are so many barriers, legal barriers, like you mentioned earlier. You need to get permits until the night before. You don't know who's getting the permit. You don't know if the Palestinian speaker will get a permit or not. You don't know, Israelis cannot go to the West Bank because legally they're not allowed to. And so this event does bring an image that most Israelis and most Palestinians do not see of who's on the other side of the wall. Most Israelis have never heard a Palestinian tell their stories of loss because often we just hear, and I've heard it from many, many students in classrooms when Alec and I will go, aren't mothers happy when Palestinians go and die because it's, you know, they come on TV and they look happy. And this is, I appreciate they asked the question, but that's the image they have. And on the Israeli side, so rarely do Palestinians get to hear somebody like Alec who talks about occupation and the end of occupation, who talks about, I don't want to carry a gun and go and fight against you. I don't want to be in the military, and that's not my objective. It's not about, oh, how good it is for us to die for this country. Instead, it's what can we do to live for this place? We've made this place sound so holy that it's only good for death. And a holy place is supposed to be good for life, not for death. So in many ways, that's, I think, why this ceremony is special, because it gives humanity a chance. It shows the human being. It brings down so many stereotypes, and it makes you empathize with somebody maybe you don't empathize with, you don't have compassion for, and suddenly it's hard not to, as you hear them tell their stories.
Wow, you guys both said such really powerful things. Alec, I love what you said about creating a new language about loss, because, you know, I think, I'm sure for the parent circle and for combatants, this is really what the ceremony is all about. It's like, how do we express the same feeling of loss, but how do we express it in a way that resonates for us? And what are the words that we want to use? And what are the sort of the messages? So I really appreciate what you said about it being a language for you. And Aziz, you know, what you said about the ceremony being an illustration of the potential of what humanity's potential, of how great humanity can really be, was equally as powerful. So thank you both for that. I was wondering what the ceremony was going to be like this year. And I think this was on the minds for many Israelis and Palestinians, given what's happening in Israel and in Palestine right now. I'm assuming everyone here has been following the news and seeing the weekly protests about the judicial overhaul in Israel. And this, to me, this ceremony, people are now used to getting out on the street, being out on the street and coming together in solidarity. And so I'm wondering, Eliak, if you can tell us a little bit about, what the ceremony means in terms of today's reality, not only the political reality, but also, in terms of the people to people reality, right? Like the civil unrest on the ground. Like, what does it mean for the hundreds of thousands of Israelis that are getting out every weekend and demanding democracy? And we heard a lot about democracy at the Memorial Day ceremony. So you can't separate those out. And Aziz, in terms of Palestine, I mean, the violence is increasingly worse. I think we've lost more Palestinian lives this year than we have in any other year to date. It's an atrocity, the number of lives that are continue to be lost. And so, by Jewish people living in the West Bank, by the IDF, and what does the ceremony mean in light of that? Like, how do we say these words in Tel Aviv about ending the bloodshed, and yet the reality on the ground is very different? And then we're going to turn it over to questions. So if you have questions, please send them to the 2 send question here boxes that you see, and we'll open it up to questions.
I mean, I'll be very quick and sharp on this question. I mean, and I think they said it wonderfully through the ceremony. Yossi Tzabari said it, and it was said a number of times. And I think this is our role. If we need to look for our historical role at this moment and what the ceremony does, it's exactly this. There is something very inspiring about this protest, this uprising. Intifada, Mohammad Beiruti called it, of the Israeli liberal camp against the racist, fascist government that exists right now. There's also something infuriating because, I mean, they didn't rise up when we asked them to. When we refused, when there were pilots that refused in the past, there were soldiers from the special forces that refused in the past, there were all these things, it was met with indifference from the Israeli society. And in that sense, there's something puzzling about this moment. However, we protest, we join, we engage, and because, as I said, this is our duty to continuously mentioning. I mean, this is a noble venture. Fascism should be fought against and should be stopped. It won't be a democracy if it's not a democracy for all. There cannot be a democracy without occupation. There cannot be a democracy without equal rights. There cannot be equal rights when the pain of the other and the reality of life of the other is ignored. A fantasy of going back to some pristine Israel cannot work. We have the model of where to go. I mean, we don't know the end result, but working together, we can do wonderful things. And this should be a constant reminder. The anti-occupation bloc is a small portion from the protests, but is there to remind, to annoy, to piss everyone off, but to tell them there will be no democracy without occupation, but democracy without occupation is possible. We have a model to develop them. The ongoing work we've been doing for nearly 20 years together, this is a model.
Eliak, I'm just going to clarify, because this is being recorded, that you mean to say there is no democracy with occupation, yes?
With. I said without. I'm sorry. I'm a bit excited and overflowing
Don't
with
want your
mistakes.
words to be misrepresented.
Okay, no, God forbid, with occupation. There can't be democracy with occupation.
We all know what you meant. That's just.
Okay, no. I'm sorry if yeah.
Aziz.
Yeah, same. I was thinking for, Palestinians don't have like a set Memorial Day like Israelis do. And our Memorial Day usually is the first day of the holidays, because you go pray in the morning and right after you go to the cemeteries. And that's when basically it's our memorial time. And that was 2 days ago. So it actually this year matched literally at the same time. And unfortunately, just you mentioned, this is a year where many, many more Palestinians have joined the bereaved families, which is something I know we always say at the Parent Circle that we never wanted this organization to grow, because as it grows, it means more suffering happens. How do Palestinians look at it? It's quite a depressing time, because not only these things are going on and more people getting killed, and you have pogroms like in Hawara where people just walk in with guns and start burning homes and burning cars, and pretty much no one's held accountable for it. If anything, the military protected those who did it. I think the loss of hope is significant, and the loss of way forward is significant. In many ways, actually, Palestinians watch what's happening in Israel with a lot of skepticism on the democracy aspect, because the ones I've been talking to usually tell me, wait, what democracy are we talking about? Because we haven't enjoyed democracy. I grew up in Jerusalem. We haven't enjoyed democracy, even though we officially live in Israel. We weren't ever part of that. Suddenly now everyone's interested in democracy. Or is it really democracy, or is it just certain rights for some people who live between the river and the sea? And so I would say the ceremony is important, because hopefully, like Alex said, we are trying to show an alternative, because where there is no vision, where there is no hope, we will see more violence. You will see more angry people. You will see more attacks, because if people don't have hope, don't have a vision of how we go out forward, they think violence is the only path. And I hope through this ceremony and similar work, peace work that combatants and the Parent Circle and other organizations are doing, can show a different path forward. If we give up and give in to this language of the only way forward is violence, is showing them that we can beat them, which is pretty much what the message going on right now in mainstream media for sure, we in a big trouble.
Yeah, you're right. We do need this alternative. We do need this other language. I'm going to start taking questions from the audience. So there's already a number of questions coming in, and feel free to continue sending them in. This is to both of you. How do you navigate tension and pushback from your respective communities? I mean, I know you both live in the US, but how do you deal with tension from your communities, both here in the US? So Alec, I guess the American Jewish community, Aziz, for you, the American Palestinian or American Muslim community, and then back in your respective communities, right, in Israel and Palestine, you must get pushback. You must get people who are not happy with what you are doing and what you are saying. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start on this one, Alex. So I give you a break for a second. We did from the beginning. You're always going to have people who disagree with you. From my perspective, that's okay. I disagreed with what I'm doing 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I would have told myself, this is stupid and you shouldn't do this. And this is almost being a traitor to your own cause. So I understand when people are angry with what I'm doing. I think this is a marathon sometimes, and not what I try to say is kind of what you say in the beginning. It's what are the alternatives? What are the other choices we have? Even when you have a just cause, even when you are right, doesn't mean you cross a red light when cars are coming just because you are right. It doesn't make sense. So yeah, we get a lot of pushback. I think the question is how do we respond to it? And we try as much as we can with patience. I think people who disagree with us are not our enemies. I think in many cases they've been brainwashed, just like, you know, I've been there, Alec, I'm sure you've been there. And us being there makes us have more sympathy. Now, the trick, we don't have forever to wait. And so it's an everlasting struggle where you keep engaging with people and try to get more and more people to join our way of working together rather than working against each other. Yeah, it does happen here in the States. I think in the States, I get more, you know, people think this is naive. Why are you doing this? Stuff like that. I find it actually easier in some ways in Palestine, partially because we live it day in and day out. It's different, while here we can be removed. So it's easy to say we shall fight forever and we should never give up anything. And it's easier to do it in the US to have talking points. While if you are in Ramallah, in Bethlehem, in Hebron, in Gaza, it's a lot harder. You are living every moment of military occupation. And so it's much more difficult.
I mean, I completely agree with what Aziz said. I want just to add two very small things. And first of all is that, I mean, and this is what we do in Combatants for Peace. This is what we do in the Parent Circle. In a sense, this is the essence of this day. We use our identities, we use our stories, we use our connections to these communities. And our connection both to the struggle as soldiers and as militants on either side, or as bereaved parents. I mean, bereaved parents, brothers, family members, people who pay the highest price. People listen. They have a harder time dismissing us. I served in the army and I decided against it. It's not that I don't know what I'm talking about. I lost my sister. When they come and tell me the feelings of the bereaved parents, I know what that is. And this is a position that makes people listen. And once people can listen, I mean, things can move and things can change. And this is an experience. I mean, me and Aziz, we talked in hundreds of high schools in Israel, and definitely not the finest ones. We just stepped into really hard situations. But it is always the same thing. It is an arming to meet your enemy and see him as a human being. Everyone, even the biggest Arab hater, would want 1 second to tell that guy what he thinks of him. And in that 1 second, you buy your world.
And you know, can I add just to this, what I found always amazing when I went with you to an Israeli school, yeah, they yelled at you first for bringing me in, and then the next hour and 15 minutes, they want to ask me a zillion questions about
Yeah.
Palestine and what's Palestinians do and what Palestinians think and all of that.
And the same thing when we were in Palestinian venues. So
Right.
he's a traitor for bringing me, but you tell us everything because we never. And this is something that we can use for, and we do. This is the core of our work. And also, I mean, we have our personal experience that can maybe transport people and make them think of things without them having to experience themselves these terrible experiences. Maybe give them an intimation of the solace we find in working together without them having to pay that price. The other thing I wanted to say is we talk about your communities. We don't have communities. talking about the community as if it was one monolith body, it is not. It's a constellation of a million people that elect in various ways to be together in a variety of different ways. And this is exactly what I'm constantly talking about and what stands behind the ceremony. We can't let some minority group decide that one form of being Jewish is the way to be Jewish and everything else is kind of perverse or pathological. How do I deal with my Jewish community? Most of my Jewish community is further to the left from me, and I have to remind them that Israel has a right to exist and stuff like that. There are so many Jews with so many opinions, and the thing is, how do you create around you an island of quiet enough for people to talk and not just yell and throw things at one another? And I think this is what we attempt to do.
That's very true. Very well said, Alec. But there's some quite personal questions for you too. For Alec, somebody wants to know about why you refused to serve in the territories, and what would you say to young Israelis going to the army today who might be against the occupation but still feel they want to serve in the army? And for Aziz, there's a question for you about what it was like growing up in East Jerusalem and living under the occupation in East Jerusalem as a young boy, how you experienced that.
You want to go first, Aziz?
No, go ahead.
I mean, about my decision to refuse, this was a very long time ago. I refused in 2002. And but the answer very simply was that we realized we are participating in a crime. Our actions are not meant to protect Israel. They are meant to maintain the illegal settlement in the Palestinian occupied territories. And as such, we were not promoting the security of Israel, but actively in our actions, we were damaging it. This was the reason we decided to refuse, and this was the reason that we gave. We also believe that such a dramatic gesture against the holiest of holies in Israel will inspire some public debate, as happened now and didn't really happen in our time. The main reason I'll say personally that I refuse to serve in the occupied territories is that I believe it's a war crime and I don't want to be a part of it. I am not that big of a pacifist, but I do want to pick my fights, and this is a foul one. It's not a fight that is honorable to participate in. And this is what I'll say to every young soldier. I understand the pull of the myth of the masculinity of being for your country and all that, the sense you get, the stories you can tell yourself about the one changing from the inside. You can't. And honorable people should refuse. Of course, this is a complicated decision that is determined by so many social and socioeconomic factors. However, this I can say, and with friends that I have from all around the world that did not go to wars, from Vietnam through Algeria, through Israel's many engagement in Lebanon until the very last moment in the occupied territories, giving yourself this gift of not being part of the crime, of stepping away from injustice, that's not something you regret.
Life in East Jerusalem. There's so many things I can talk about, but I think the biggest probably thing you feel with living under occupation in East Jerusalem is your inability to feel able to go anywhere without being verified. I mean, the first thing you do before you leave your house, you make sure you have your identification card with you. And you know, if you don't have your identification card with you and a soldier stops you, you're going to get you're going to get arrested. You might get slapped, beat up. God knows what would happen. So that's, I think, it's just you're reminded all the time that you're not free. Everywhere you go through Damascus Gate, there's a checkpoint. And usually young people are the ones who get stopped and asked and, searched and so on. You go into Salahuddin Street, there's a police station, same thing. So even though you're in a very much like Salahuddin Street, it's all Palestinian community, you still have a police station there and you get stopped quite often. You go into Ras Al Amud, the same thing. So there's this reminder that we are here and we are sovereign. So that's one, sovereign over you, and you're not equal. You have no right to really be part of governing. There's a whole campaign I worked on. You can't, as a Palestinian in East Jerusalem, run for the mayor of Jerusalem. So you're not really an equal. Building in East Jerusalem. So my family built a house just outside the municipal borders in Bethany, which is 2-3 miles. And eventually the government decided that's unacceptable. So if you don't live within the municipal borders, you lose your right to access Jerusalem. So everyone like us ended up moving into small apartments. There was no building allowed in East Jerusalem by Palestinians. It's still, I think, less than 5,000 permits were given the last 50 plus years in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, to Palestinians. You can imagine, you're talking about 400,000 people, and that's all the permits were given in almost over 50 years. So it meant you couldn't build. My family, we moved from our house. It was my parents, my 3 brothers who were married and had kids, and me in a 2-bedroom apartment, which you can imagine I was given the kitchen to live in. So, but this wasn't just my family. This was everyone around me. It's just part of your life. There are so many stumbling blocks into every aspect of life. And the way Palestinians look at it is that it's meant to make you want to leave. It's meant to tell you you don't belong here. And that's a message you always get. Schools overcrowded. Wherever you go, you never an equal, Alec, you went in West Jerusalem, I lived in East Jerusalem. I think our lives, we never met each other's kids, and that was almost impossible for Israelis and Palestinians to meet. But our lives were so different, I would argue. Like, I don't know if when you were 15 or when you were 16, you needed to carry your ID everywhere, because if you don't, you might get arrested.
No, we were very proud to finally get it in 16, and we carried it everywhere, even though it was absolutely unnecessary. No, but yeah, it's a mirror image. Yeah. It's a complete, we have no idea of the life. I was not exposed to that in depth until I met Aziz and became an activist.
Yeah, I'll tell you just one random thing. I think first time I was tear gassed coming out of school, not doing anything, was when I was 8 years old, probably. I made my parents change my school because I refused to go to one in the old city because it was raided by the army all the time. And a week in, I told my parents I will never go to school, and I cried every morning. I was 9 years old then, and I'm like, I'm not going to school, because it was horrifying, and had them change my school to a school outside the old city, because I just wouldn't do it. I got probably beat up a dozen, maybe more times, for random reasons. One, leaving my ID. Actually, I wasn't allowed to get my ID for a while because we lived outside the municipal borders, and so I got caught without it, and got beat up for that. So those were normal things that you just expect. It's part of life.
Wow, you guys have painted such a intense picture about both of your lives and different moments in your lives. We're about close to the hour, the end of our hour, and I know Tiffany wants to leave us with some information at the end. But before we turn it over to Tiffany, if you guys could, for me, the ceremony is very much about creating a sense of hope, right? And that's something that's a rare commodity these days, hope. And I know it's almost unfair to ask of you, who paid such a big price, where you get your hope from, but I know that whenever I do ask this question of our bereaved members, it is always inspiring. So if you'll allow me, I will ask you where you get your sense of hope, even if some days it's not there as much as it is other days. When it is there, where does it come from?
I'll start actually on this one. I just was thinking it actually before you even asked. I think I get it from Alec. I get it from my partners who I work with, and their commitment, Alec's commitment, the other members of these organizations, the people who are fully dedicated and never given up. You kind of become, it's funny because we were meant to be enemies, and yet when I think of Alec, for example, that word would never even cross, or that sentiment, my mind. He started by introducing me as his brother, and in many ways we do really feel that kinship because we understand the pain we went through. But it's more even than that. I think we have the same mission, and when one of us is maybe weaker, the other weaker in the sense we struggle with through everything we see, the other can push him forward and help. And it's partnerships. That's what keeps you strong. That's what, you see the lives of people changing around you. You see the commitment of the people you're working with, and you can't even entertain the idea of giving up.
Really beautiful, Aziz. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was about, you stole my line. But yeah, this is the truth of it. And I think this is something that, well, it used to be a very common truth that I think still some silly old sentimental leftists remember. But there's hope in people. If to completely misquote Hannah Arendt, as long as people are born, you can't lose hope. They do the weirdest, strangest things you could never imagine. As long as people are born, you cannot imagine what change will come. And I think we have practical experience of that. I mean, we go in the most insane moments, insane environments to share our most intimate story with a crowd of people that is more than often hostile towards us. And every time, I mean, it's it's an experience. It's an eventful experience. Something changes, something is different. And if I stumble, Aziz can help. If Aziz needs a hand, I can help. And people listen to us. And I think you don't need much more than that to sustain hope.
Yeah, and I think that that's true for all of you people who are here today. You're also a source of hope for us. I know for me and I think I can speak on behalf of our friends at Combatants for Peace and for Alec and Aziz. So thank you all for being here with us today. You are also our hope, and also the thousands of people watching the ceremony online and thousands of people who were in Tel Aviv watching today. The numbers are still coming in, so we'll get you our official numbers as they count them. Tiffany, did you want to just say goodbye to everybody? Oh, I just got a number in, actually. Oh no, sorry, premature.
Hi, everyone. Well, thank you, Alec and Aziz, for sharing your hearts, your stories, your brilliance. I want to say, I'm sure I speak on behalf of Sherry and our partners at Parent Circle. We're really honored to do this journey with you, to stand in solidarity with you, to be your American friends. And I think I speak on behalf of everybody who sits on this Zoom with us right now in this moment. Thank you for letting us be a part of the work that you're doing to contribute to it, to empower it. It makes our lives better, and it changes our worlds. And it changes the whole world. I believe that this is a light needed across the entire earth. I also just want to thank Parent Circle Family Forums for partnering with us on the joint memorial. It's a huge undertaking. If you guys could have seen how crazy we all were the last couple months on the back end, getting it put together. And I want to say thank you to Christopher, whose name is currently send questions here, to Shiri, my colleague, and also to Lindsay, who is sitting next to me, my coworker. All of you who donated to make the event possible, I want to thank you so much. This event is primarily funded by people internationally, and we're actually at, it looks like, about 72% of our funding goal need. As you probably heard from the ceremony today, they're keeping the fundraising page open so that we can try to 100% fund and not have any deficits that will impact programs. So if you have not donated yet, I encourage you to give a gift toward the ceremony. And if you have given and you want to give again, then we certainly wouldn't refuse your generosity. So everyone, I hope you have a most wonderful day. Thank you all for joining and participating. And I thank you for doing this good work together.